Hello and welcome to Moneylife News and Views. I am Debashis Basu. A few days ago, Mr. Dinesh Khara, who is the chairman of State Bank of India, told the media that 20% of its loan portfolio of 26,000 crore, which relates to Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana, has gone bad. Now, to those who have been listening to this video or has been reading my articles, this would not come as a surprise at all. 6 years ago, when the scheme was launched, which is Mudra Loans, I had said that this is another Loan Mela. Because under Mudra, you can get collateral free, that is, you don't have to provide any collateral to the bank, collateral free unsecured loans of up to 10 lakhs. And this was for small, tiny, micro kind of businesses. Now, why was a scheme like this launched? This was the Modi government's desire to break the stranglehold of money lenders on one hand, who lend money at a very high interest rate, and also force banks to give more money. They were calling banks lazy people, lazy banking, that they were not taking the trouble to give money to people who really need it, that is a small businessman. Now this may have sounded noble and very well meaning in theory, and so it quickly became a very attractive policy for policymakers, the IAS officers, the netas and the babus who rule this country. Except that this kind of an idea of equitable lending, which is fair-minded lending or whatever you call it, has been tried before and has been found to have failed miserably. Not today, not a few years ago, but decades ago. The same very desire to ensure fairness in lending through determined government action drove the socialist Mrs. Indira Gandhi to nationalize banks and force them to do what is called directed lending to priority sectors, which included small business and micro units. The same thing has come back in a new garb 30-40 years later, because politicians don't change, they all want to do good. But not only did such directed credit work at that time, and if loans don't work, obviously they go bad, and so therefore the loan melas inflicted tremendous amount of pain and stress on the banking system. Quite apart from the fact that the nationalization itself led to large-scale corruption, and banks had to be repeatedly recapitalized with our money, which is the taxpayers' money. Because the banks turned weak, that is mainly the public sector banks turned weak, their ability to lend money to small businesses became even more compromised. So the original idea of forcing banks to lend money to small businesses actually led to the opposite effect, which is banks being very weak and not being able to lend to people who really need them. Strangely and very ironically, almost 35 years later, Narendra Modi, who is like the leading light of the economic right, as they call it, as opposed to the socialist left of Mrs. Gandhi, decided to borrow the same ideas from the Nehru-Gandhi principles, economic principles, and offered us the same failed solution for equitable lending, which is a government scheme for small borrowers with even more ambitious scope. Mudra loans came into the picture, and they were supposed to be guaranteed by Credit Guarantee Fund Trust for micro and small enterprises. If banks were not supposed to look at collateral, there was a backstop, which is there was a government agency which would fund the banks in turn. So really passing the buck from the banks to CGT MSC, which is not even a lending institution. Now, this institution was supposed to cover 75% of all loans, but Mr. Khara is saying, the State Bank of India chairman is saying that 25%, even 25% liability, which is the banks, even that has now become a big challenge for State Bank of India. And remember, State Bank is one of the best public sector banks. So you can imagine what's happening with the other public sector banks. How big is the problem? In financial year 2021, 3.21 lakh crore of Mudra loans were sanctioned to around 51 million borrowers, almost 5 crore borrowers, and of this 3.11 crore was actually disbursed, which is 3.11 lakh crore has actually gone out, and almost all of it, or the bulk of it, is bad. Now, State Bank India also has separately notched up 7.22% bad loan for its MSME book, which is outside Mudra, the normal lending to small businesses. Now, this was known that this is going to happen. So the government tried to provide a spin. In 2018, when the economy was stagnating badly, Mudra was publicized as a job creation scheme. The Prime Minister claimed in the Parliament that we gave loans to 13 crore youngsters through the Mudra scheme. However, since 90% of the loans were issued under the smallest category, the Shishu category, which is up to 50,000 rupees, it is very surprising to see the Prime Minister claiming 13 crore jobs were created. With 50,000 rupees loan per head, how many jobs can a tiny micro business create? It's quite ridiculous. Besides, as we just discussed, the default rate for that category is also the highest. But the government can claim anything that it wants to and get away with it. So, Union Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad did not hesitate to make this breathtaking claim that we have given loans worth 4 lakh crore to 80 million people, that's 8 crore people, he said. If each employed at least one person, at least 4 crore jobs were created automatically. And as you can well imagine, this is all absolutely ridiculous, unverifiable claims. The Loan Mela, called Mudra, was a populist and political move to give away money to people that the government wanted to or forced the banks to. Not surprisingly, almost immediately bad debt started piling up, and the scheme continued to remain a headache for the Reserve Bank of India and the banks, which were forced to do all this. From 4.3% Mudra bad loans in 2016-17, it shot up to 9.3% in 2018-19 as political parties canvassed this whole scheme, organized camps for their supporters, exactly like the Loan Mela of Mrs. Gandhi. This has, of course, generated some bizarre data which I found from the Mudra's official government website. But these are completely incredible, unbelievable sort of data. In 2019-20, Uttar Pradesh was the second highest in sanctions, and Bihar was well ahead of Gujarat and neck with Maharashtra in terms of sanctions. And you can very well imagine what is the credibility of this data, because Bihar is commercially far below Gujarat and Maharashtra, which are India's two most commercialized and economically prosperous states. Now here is another one. As a district, Kolkata and North 24 Parganas, both are districts as part of the economic wasteland called West Bengal, they were number 3 and number 5 on all India basis. Just imagine how incredible this data is. In January 2019, the Reserve Bank of India cautioned that PMMY, that is Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana, generated 11,000 crore of non-performing loans. And this could upset the credit market quite severely. In July 2019, the Reserve Bank of India blamed poor credit appraisal system of banks for rising credits, but the banks themselves say that they are being forced to give out loans. The biggest set of loans, bad loans, 12.39%, were in the smallest loan category, quite obviously. So not only has the Mudra Loan Mela generated no jobs, but has frittered away lakhs and crores of rupees of taxpayers' money through the banks. Now these loans were supposed to be for a period of 3 to 5 years. So the first cycle of experiment is over, because it was launched in 2015. And we know the result, and the result has been disastrous. They were destined to fail, because there's something in the scheme itself which ensures that the loans go back. The scheme very clearly says that the emphasis shall be on cash flow based lending and not on security based lending. Which means if the business can show that from somewhere, by the cooking of their books, or from somewhere they have to show that they are getting enough of cash flow, even if they're making a loss, the bank is supposed to fund such a business. The scheme said the collateral securities shall be avoided very clearly. Repayment obligations shall be flexible. These are the very words of the scheme. And framed keeping in view the business cash flow of the entrepreneur. So the entrepreneur decides, now I need the money, and then the bank cannot ask for the money back. A July 2019 report in Business Standard quotes bankers being very alarmed about all this, and telling the RBI governor that they did not have the manpower to chase errant borrowers. They complained about the loan target set by the government and also the RBI. And they told Business Standard that often the staff at branches was too eager to give away loans just to meet the targets set by the government. Once the loan is given, there is virtually no effective mechanism to recover the money through agents and business correspondents. But they are often local people, and the borrowers don't take these agents and business correspondents seriously at all. The government might like to claim that Mudra is a big success, but this has been one of the biggest drains of money from our banks. And it would be a very good idea right now to bury the scheme before it inflicts any further damage to the Indian banking system. Indeed, Mudra is part of the first phase of many of Mr. Modi's schemes, which are all completely wasteful or substantially wasteful. There is Startup India, Stand Up India, Digital India, Clean India, Smart Cities. There is very little to show for any of these ideas. In fact, Mr. Modi's more recent policies, which is a lot of emphasis on renewable energy, things like ethanol blending or solar power and so on, a set of production linked incentives which is giving to large companies across 13 sectors. Then there is tariff protection which it is offering sometimes to protect domestic industries. These are far more effective in creating a vibrant domestic industry, in creating jobs and employment. And in all these cases, the government is not running any scheme of spending money. They are supporting organized large private sector enterprises, which is the right thing to do. Now, this would obviously be far better to continue with, and it's time to give the wasteful schemes of the first phase, including Mudra, a decent burial. I hope you liked watching this, and if you did, do click the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.